How much did that moment change your life?
It changed me almost entirely.
Completely changed my life.
To say that it changed my life is a little understatement. It absolutely was an earthquake that changed my life.
There's one classic folk myth of a story that everybody knows.
Taught to you at an early age, young coaches would talk to you about it.
We remind them of the story, every time the tournament time came around, that anything's possible.
I guess you have to understand how important basketball was to the state of Indiana.
How can we shoot a film that really captures the importance of basketball in Indiana?
No small team like ours had ever won a state tournament.
It's the #1 sports story in Indiana. That's how important it is. And this is a high school basketball game we're talking about.
I was driving home, I started thinking of telling a story that was inspired by the Milan story.
Well, number one, I thought, how's that gonna sell,
I kind of chuckled when I got done reading it. I said, you can't make a movie out of this. They did.
It was just 2 years ago, LA Times had a best sports film thing, and Hoosiers is #1. It's a 37-year-old movie, and there have been a ton of sports movies made since then. That blows my mind.
What was life like in Milan in 1954?
Well, Milan was a town of probably about 1,000. Nothing really exciting, I don't think.
We never had electricity until I was 13 years old. We never did have running water. Never had a telephone. When I graduated from high school, I had to go to my neighbors to make dates. They knew who I was dating all the time. So it was a simple, we never went hungry. We raised everything. We had about 3 acres, and we raised everything we ate in the wintertime. We packed it up.
I grew up in the country. I grew up on a farm. So I didn't go into town that often. But when we did, there was a purpose.
It had a store, it had a bank, had a hardware store.
A real kind of sense of community in all of these, different, groupings that we don't have today.
It had a movie theater, but if we had a ball game on Friday night, then it closed. Nobody would be there, so they closed.
Basketball was everything in Indiana as far as sports is concerned. We never had a state championship for football. We had one for track, but nobody paid attention to it. And basketball was everything. Butler Fieldhouse back in 1954 seated 15,000. The games were televised throughout the state of Indiana. It was the 3rd year for television. The stands were full. Tickets were $3.50. You saw 2 games, one late morning, early afternoon, the championship that night. They tell me they paid $15. Tickets were only $3.50, and you saw all those games. They said they paid $15 scalping tickets to get in and watch this. People come in, television was just coming out, and not very many people had it. People have also come in and said, we went to the local store to watch on TV that game because we had never seen a small school like that for 2 years that went on. We were in the Final Four our junior year, and they said that it was full in there. People were watching. We stood outside, and we're looking through the window, and it's cold, but we saw the game, and basketball was the best sport in Indiana at that time. I mean, that's just remarkable.
Why are people still talking about the Milan team 70 years later?
Well, back then we had a one-class system, and no single class system had won a state championship until 1954. And after that, then it was always, well, is there going to be another Milan?
We had class basketball. Now we have multi-class basketball.
752 schools, and only one survived as the winner, and that was Milan. And you can't overlook that.
We've gone to class basketball now, you know. So the David versus Goliath thing is kind of, unless that ever gets changed, that you're never going to see the smallest school in the state beat the biggest school in the state. So it's pretty safe to say it may never ever be accomplished again.
And I think that's why they call it the Milan miracle.
And then the movie Hoosiers didn't hurt anything.
Hoosiers would not be here without Milan. The Hoosiers movie, David and Angela would tell you they always had a dream to do a movie about Indiana High School basketball, but it was inspired by the Milan team.
I got my car, Bloomington, and drove down to Versailles and went through the microfiche of that 53 and 54 season and just wrote tons of notes, you know, a lot of small detailed notes. And I heard that there was a player that was in Milan that had a feed and chick store. And I decided to go over and talk to him. And I asked him, so how did everybody get along on your team? And he said,
There was never any controversy. There was never any jealousy.
You know, they're our friends, they're our buddies, they're a teammate, and
We were having fun.
yeah, we were like a family. We started playing ball together when we were in third grade.
They were my heroes.
We all loved each other, and I said, well, what about the coach?
Pretty lucky to have a coach like Marvin Wood.
Marvin Wood would be among the nicest people you would want to know.
Let's win for Coach, who got us here. Thank you.
We loved him, and he loved us, and it was like I started having this vision of the most boring movie of all times. And I did ask this question. I said, was there any problem player that had to be disciplined? He thought for a long while. I said, well, Bobby Plump used to show up late and he had to run laps. And I just didn't think that was the heart and soul of what it could be a good movie. So as I was driving home, I started thinking of telling a story that was inspired by the Milan story, to give me the opportunity to create characters and the freedom to find conflict, both inner and outer, to tell a good story.
I didn't look at it as a comparison. I looked at it as entertainment.
Why not use the name Milan in the names of the players?
Because we didn't want to mislead people to think it's a Milan story, because if you think about it, the coach for Hickory is, 50 years old, kind of on the last leg of his struggling life.
They hired a 24-year-old, and he changed our system just like the movie Hoosiers.
Seen you guys can shoot, but there's more to the game than shooting. There's fundamentals and defense.
Changed us from a zone to a man-to-man. Closed practice. You didn't do that either.
Listen, guys, practice is closed to outsiders. I don't want any distractions.
Outsiders?
Coach Tidd,
I'm not sure you're in your
Well, that was Coach Tidd. This is something else now.
Because the townsfolk, when they saw us practicing, they used to come down and watch it. They didn't like what was going on.
Let's go. Come on.
We won the first 5 ball games, and you couldn't find anybody that criticized him in Milan. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And as I told you before, he's the reason we won the tournament.
I wanted to honor what that team meant to the history and tradition of Indiana. I knew, and we hoped that people would pick up, that we were doing a story inspired by the Milan story.
They really tried hard to make it authentic as it was in the 50s.
Yeah, we had to be really careful about going behind our back, between our legs. It was a very fundamentally sound time period. And Bobby would tell you that the jump shot was just kind of coming in. You know, you didn't see a lot of people shooting at the peak of their jump.
Another way we honored that game and that experience was the team that they beat in the semifinal, which is Oscar Robertson's Crispus Attucks teams.
Maybe the greatest player that ever played, you know. We were fortunate to beat them. One of the greatest that ever played the game, and not just as a scorer, passer, rebounder. He made every player that he played with better. That's a mark of a good player.
We had the coach of Crispus Attucks and Oscar's brother be the head coach and assistant coach on the South Bend team.
You know, the only time I ever got out of Milan, I went to Dad when he took some hogs or something to Cincinnati to the stockyard.
You come from a small farm town, you show up to Butler Fieldhouse for the first time. What was your reaction?
I was in awe of the structure itself, and I was more in awe when they filled this thing with people.
15,000 people. Milan was a town of 1,100, so we could have a lot of towns in here.
Had you ever seen that many people in your life in one building before?
No.
You get to come Friday before the games on Saturday to practice. And we're a bunch of naive kids, and we didn't come by bus. The GM dealer in Milan gave us Buicks for the semi-state and Cadillacs for the state tournament. But as juniors, we're coming in, we got our satchels, and we're talking, and you know how kids are at that point. And the coach, Marvin Wood, graduated from Butler. So we came in, the front doors up there, and he walked us into the gym on that side. And all of a sudden, everybody got quiet, and they're looking around in here. Bob Engel, one of our players, said, "Put a lot of hay in this place, couldn't you?" And that kind of broke the spell a little bit. But it was a big place.
Buddy? How far?
10 feet.
10 feet. I think you'll find it's exact same measurements as our gym back in Hickory.
The most often quoted scene in the movie, by far.
Okay, let's get dressed for practice.
I think it's so meaningful because it was trying to calm us down and say, when we measure that, it's the same dimensions as our gym back in Hickory. And we do that little laugh like, yeah, okay, we get it now, coach. And just the fact that I happen to be part of that is just I'm humbled by that. You know, I was the guy that measured, and Ollie was on Strap's shoulders. So yeah, that was a cool scene. And that was in Hinkle, too. That was one of the first scenes we shot in Hinkle.
Where did that come from?
It actually came from another coach that came in here the first time with his kid, and I read about it. And then somebody, and I forgot about it, and then somebody reminded me when we were doing location scouting. So I kind of reconfigured that scene. And I originally had, the scene was, you could put a lot of hay bales in here. I actually had written that because I had read that about what Marvin Wood said. But that version about measuring the goal was better.
The only factual thing in the movie is the last 18 seconds after the ball is thrown in. That's exactly what happened.
Bobby Plump had pointed the spot where he took that shot, and we weren't going to move from that. That was going to be our way of honoring him.
Angelo Pizzo asked our team to come to a sneak preview of it.
We screened it for the governor, lieutenant governor, Bobby Plump, and I think a couple of other players. And God, we were so, if they don't like it, you know, we failed. We were literally failed. And I remember very well Bobby coming out of the theater, he put his arms around it, he said, "It's not our story, but you captured something really special, really special."
He said, "Did we get the last 18 seconds right?"
And And your answer?
I said, perfect. We come to the huddle, and Marvin Wood was always calm. He's very quiet. He says, okay, here's what we're going to do. He says, Ray, you take the ball out of bounds and throw it to Bob, me. He said, Bob, you just dribble around till maybe 5 or 6 seconds to go, and then you can start your move. And if you can, leave enough time in case you miss it, maybe we could tip it in. Gene White, our starting center, said, well, Woody, that's what we called him, by the way, was Woody, said, Woody, if we're going to do that, why don't we get on the left side and click? Woody said, that's a good idea. That's what we'll do.
That gave him, a right-handed guy, that gave him half of the court to work with.
And I said, let's go over it again. He said, Ray, you take it out and throw it to Bob. Guess who took the ball out of bounds? I did.
You just went over the plate.
And normally, you know, when you make a mistake, they talk about it. When we hit the winning bucket, nobody cares.
And what's going through your head at this time, because you were having the best game out of everyone on the team at this point?
Well, I mean, somebody says, well, you were the leading scorer, why didn't you take the shot? That wasn't even a consideration. We knew who was going to take the shot.
Corner back out to Bobby Plump, and Muncie beginning to bottle up that middle now.
Oh,
Bobby was due.
By the way, that's the worst game I played in 2 years of tournament play. Until I made the last 4 points, I had 6 points, and I had 71 points in the previous 3 games. So you're right, I was having a terrible game.
You remember for your worst game?
Muncie didn't put any pressure on us here because they were, we was tied.
30 seconds. Holds it. He's rubbing around. 10 seconds. 9 seconds. Bobby Plump.
All right, so I go. I get to here and I shoot a jump shot.
6 seconds. Clock going down.
And the jump shot was big, right? Because nobody was doing that then.
No, I might have been, well, Ray shot a jump shot, but there was only maybe 2 people or 3 that shot a jump shot in 1954 in the final game.
When did you know the ball was going through the basket?
Actually, I knew it was going in the basket when it left my hands.
Really?
Yes. If you're a shooter, you know where the ball's going. That's why you have a best chance to get a rebound also. I did know it was going in, and if you look at the film, there was 3 seconds to go when it went through the bucket, and they took, it wasn't as sophisticated then, they took the ball out, threw it to Leon Aguilano, and he was about here, and his arm was back like that, and the buzzer went off, and we knew we won, but we went back on defense. There wasn't any shouting and hey and all that. We were ready to go back on defense and stop them.
Bob Collins, who was a sports writer here, told Plump if he hadn't hit that shot, he'd be pumping gas in Pierceville.
We're already 70 years from that game, but generations from now, how do you hope to be remembered here?
That even though they want to call this a miracle, we were here the year before.
Well, I'm not sure I've ever been asked that, but off the top of my head, I would say that I'd like to be remembered as a good basketball player, but more importantly, as a good person.
We're just happy it happened to us, I guess.
They had to take a lot of dedication for what they were doing, and that's important.
There is something I want to add. Thank you for thinking about us.